The evil squid wizard is back, and this time it's personal. That's right, meat shields, we're going back to Hawkins, where every few months, terrifying creatures from another dimension try to kill everyone in town. But this season, they're up against their biggest challenge yet, with an army of hive mind zombies, oozing abominations, possessed older brothers, and even a secret underground base. And you're going to be absolutely shocked by how it all ends. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Mind Flayer's army in Stranger Things Season 3. It's been just 6 months since Eleven and the boys defeated a terrifying creature known as the Mind Flayer, trapping it back in the Upside Down, and saving their friend Will from its control. At least, that's what they think. But tonight, everything is going to change. Biking over to the newly built Starcourt Mall, the gang head to the ice cream shop where their old pal Steve just got a job, and use the maintenance hallways to get into a sneak preview of Day of the Dead. They're just grabbing seats and getting out their snacks when, out of nowhere, the screen suddenly goes blank. But it's not just the theater. The whole mall and even the entire town just lost power, and no one has any clue what could possibly have caused it. At that same moment, the abandoned steel mill on the outskirts of town suddenly comes to life as the dust begins to form into a swirling cloud of black smoke. The power comes back on a second later, leaving everyone thinking that it was just an ordinary blackout, but that's when Will senses a presence that he hasn't felt since the Mind Flayer attacked. And although he lies to Mike that everything is fine, it's the first sign that everyone in Hawkins is about to be in serious trouble. While they're making breakfast the next morning, Will's mother Joyce notices something strange. It looks like all of the magnets fell off their fridge in the middle of the night, and she quickly puts them back without thinking too much of it. But it won't be long before she realizes there's a lot more to the story. But you know, I just had a thought before we get too deep here. No demigorgons or evil Ruskies would be able to track the Super Friends if they were using today's sponsor, Opera GX. And yeah, I know they didn't have internet in the early 80s, but hear me out. Let's face it, unwanted ads are like those creepy stalkers tracking our heroes in today's story, following you everywhere you go, getting all up in your business. But with Opera GX's built-in ad blocker, you can silence the noise and browse in peace. But also, if you're like me and hate ads, you probably also hate the evil brightness of a standard browser. Well, worry no more. Opera GX's Force Dark Pages throws a shroud over those sites, turning them into a shadowy landscape that's easy on the eyes and perfect for late-night browsing sessions. But maybe you also want to vanish into the digital shadows and escape the prying eyes of online trackers. Opera GX's built-in VPN is your invisibility cloak. Activate it and browse anonymously like a ghost slipping through the internet. Now you might be thinking, well, my current browser already does all that. But does your browser let you install dope-ass custom mods that are a symbol of your individuality and belief in personal freedom? Yeah, I thought not. The GX store is a treasure trove of mods that will transform your browser from bland to downright terrifying. Swap those boring clicks for eerie whispers, sound effects, or the unsettling creak of a door opening in the dead of night. Oh, and did I mention Opera GX's quick import tool? Yeah, you can seamlessly bring over all your bookmarks and browsing history from your other browser with just a few clicks. So ditch your boring old browser and join the dark side with Opera GX. Use the link in the description below to download Opera GX today and get ready for a browsing experience that's equal parts terrifying and thrilling. Okay, I'm sorry, Mrs. Byers, but I've got some bad news. It looks like the Mind Flayer is back. Now, they haven't seen any definitive evidence yet, but if they were paying attention to the strange events that happened the night before, then it should be hard to miss all the warning signs. First, they had a town-wide blackout, which indicates that something in the area is either causing or reacting to powerful electrical disruptions. This could have been an ordinary power outage, but the magnets falling off the fridge is what tells you that there's more going on. Magnets need a stable electromagnetic field to function, and the sudden loss of attraction shows that there's been a powerful electromagnetic disturbance as well, meaning that whatever caused the blackout is also affecting the electromagnetic fields across town. In the theater, Will didn't want to scare his friends, but he knows that he only gets that feeling when the Mind Flayer is around. Last time, he made the mistake of waiting too long to get help, so this time he should really take the situation more seriously and just be honest with his friends. If they can make the connection between his weird feelings, the blackouts, and the magnets, then they'll know that they need to do something before it's too late. And the electromagnetic disturbances could be their key to tracking it down. For this, they need to go back to a strategy that they used in Season 1 and search the town using compasses. Compasses align with Earth's magnetic field, but if it's disrupted by an external electromagnetic disturbance, then they stop working properly. Knowing this, the kids should travel around town on their bikes, using compasses to triangulate the disturbances and track them back to the epicenter, where they'll find the Mind Flayer or its power source. They don't want to waste time, so as they have enough proof, they should immediately warn Hob so that he can tell the feds. And once the adults are on board, they can try shutting down the local power grid to stop the Mind Flayer or whatever's causing this from pulling more energy, which should prevent things from getting any worse. Fire won't work against the creature yet because it still doesn't have a true physical form and is currently existing as a glowing mass of pure energy. But if they can find out where it's hiding and create a sudden powerful electrical surge, then this could overload its cohesion and cause it to destabilize, possibly killing it for good or at least slowing it down. As for Dustin here, he's just getting back from a month-long trip to science camp, but no matter how many times he tries to call his boys on their walkie-talkies, nobody's there to pick up. He's feeling pretty lousy about it when all of a sudden his toys start coming to life like something out of a Stephen King movie, and he bravely grabs a can of hairspray for protection as he follows them out of the room. It turns out that it's just his buddies using Elle's powers to mess with him, and the surprise works almost too well as he spins around spraying Lucas right in the eyes. But he's relieved to know that they didn't forget about him while he was gone. First things first, it's time to show off all the crazy stuff that he invented at camp, including his most prized possession, a portable radio called Cerebro, and he's been using it to keep in touch with his new girlfriend Susie ever since. That's right, while he was away at camp, our boy Dustin finally found love. The only problem is, Susie lives in Utah, but all he has to do is fire up Cerebro here to prove that she's real. For his invention to work, they need to be at the top of the highest hill in town, but then as soon as they get there, Mike and Elle immediately ditch them to go make out, acting like she has to get home before curfew even though it's only 4 p.m. The others say that they've been doing this all summer, but they're not the only ones who think that they've been spending too much time together. Just when Will senses the same presence that he felt back at the movie theater while at the steel mill, hundreds of rats begin gathering down in the basement, where they all suddenly start exploding into tiny piles of red goo. Meanwhile, Max's evil stepbrother Billy is working as a lifeguard at the town pool, where he notices Mike's mom Karen and decides to make a move. Approaching her, he puts on the charm until he's finally able to convince her to meet up at a motel for some private lessons later that night, but little does he know that that's about to be his biggest mistake. We find Mike's sister Nancy working late at the town newspaper, where she's been struggling to get her male coworkers to take her seriously. When she's cleaning up after those slobs that call themselves reporters, she answers a phone call from a worried old lady who says that her house is overrun with diseased rats, and seeing this as a good opportunity, decides to follow up on the lead herself. Back at the cabin, poor old Hop here is stressing out like crazy, knowing that Mike and Elle are busy making out in the next room. Eventually, he decides that he's had enough and works up the courage to have a heart-to-heart using a script that Joyce helped him write. But these two refuse to take it seriously and even start mocking him straight to his face. That's when Hop decides to revert to less lenient methods, taking Mike to his car and warns him that he and Elle needs to start spending a lot less time together. Otherwise, he'll make sure that they never see each other again. The hours go by with no answer from Dustin's supposed girlfriend, and after a while, his friends decide that it's time to head home. As he's watching them go, he can't help but feeling that things just aren't the same as they used to be, when suddenly he hears a strange voice speaking over the radio, and it's definitely not Susie. They're speaking Russian and reading off a bizarre list of words that sound like a secret code. Okay, this is important because Dustin here just stumbled into something big. We, the viewers, already know that the Russians are up to something, but intercepting this secret message makes Dustin the first person in all of Hawkins to notice. He might have no idea what they're saying, but that doesn't mean he's completely useless, and it all comes down to how radios work. A ham radio transmits and receives signals over long distances using high frequency and very high frequency bands. Dustin's is extremely powerful, allowing him to reach approximately 1,500 miles from Hawkins to Salt Lake City, but even the strongest ham radios have a maximum range of about 3,000 miles, meaning that there's absolutely no way he could have picked up the transmission so clearly. If it's coming all the way from Russia, what this shows is that the Russian signal is originating from somewhere close by, possibly even right here in Indiana, and all he needs is his radio to figure out where it's coming from. Dustin's Cerebro uses a directional antenna which focuses radio signals in a specific direction, allowing for stronger signal reception over long distances while minimizing any interference from other angles. Starting right here on the hilltop, he can rotate the antenna while monitoring the signal strength, and the signal will be the strongest when it's pointed directly at the source. Using this method, he can figure out roughly what direction the broadcast is originating from. Next, he can break the radio down into a more portable form and start searching around the general area, as the signal will get stronger or weaker the closer that he gets to the source, like playing a game of hot or cold. If he picks up multiple weaker echoes of the same signal, it's a sign that the radio waves are bouncing off of something, which is most likely the interior of a building, suggesting that it might be located inside of a large structure or underground facility. Even though he has the tools to figure out where it's coming from, this isn't the kind of thing that Dustin can handle on his own. So, once he has enough evidence to make his story believable, he should really turn the case over to Hopper and the feds and let them handle it from here. Over at the Wheeler house, Karen is just about to sneak out for her late-night swimming lessons when she sees her husband and daughter sleeping on the couch and finally decides not to go. Meanwhile, Billy's speeding through town when all of a sudden something smashes into his windshield, causing him to crash right near the old steel mill. Frustrated, he gets out to see what happened, where he finds a strange green ooze on the glass. Just then, something races by in the bushes on the edge of the road, but the moment that he lets his guard down, a long, fleshy tentacle suddenly grabs him by the ankle and drags him away screaming down into the abandoned basement. Somehow, Billy manages to escape and goes running back to his car, speeding down the road until he finally gets to a payphone, but as soon as the operator picks up, everything around him suddenly changes, and it looks like he's been transported to the upside down. Off in the distance, there's a group of shadowy figures headed this way, and as one of them steps forward into the moonlight, he realizes that it's actually an exact copy of himself. The next morning, Elle starts getting worried when Mike isn't there by 9:30 sharp and decides to try calling him instead. Trying not to get in trouble with Hop, he acts like he can't hang out today because his grandma suddenly got sick, but she immediately gets the feeling that her boyfriend is a liar. As for the chief here, he goes straight over to Joyce's shop feeling like the king of the world. He's feeling so confident that he even invites her out to dinner, but just to celebrate as friends and not for an actual date. And for the first time ever, she actually says yes. They agree to meet up at 7, but as Hop leaves, all of the magnets suddenly jump off the board next to the register, and that's when she begins to realize that it might have been more than just an accident. Instead of calling the other guys, Dustin here goes straight to get some help from his good buddy Steve. Telling him about the secret Russian message, he promises that they'll be national heroes and get tons of girls, if they can figure out what it means. And since Steve here hasn't been too lucky with the ladies now that he spends all day dressed like Popeye, he immediately agrees to help him out. New to this whole relationship thing, Elle decides to go to Max for some advice, while Mike calls up the boys for an emergency meeting. His buddy Lucas here has played these games before, and he says that the best way to apologize is with a thoughtful gift, but as for Max, she says that it's time to start giving Mike the cold shoulder, and if he doesn't fix things, then Elle here is going to dump his ass. At the pool, Karen finds Billy in a storage closet and tries to apologize for missing their date, having no idea that hooking up with hot moms just became the least of his concerns. The truth is that he's barely holding it together after the attack, and every second in the hot sun is starting to feel like he's burning alive. The ice cream boys don't make it long before they hit their first major roadblock. Neither one of these dummies can actually read or speak Russian, meaning that their dictionary is completely useless. Getting frustrated, his coworker Robin finally has enough and admits that she's been listening to them the whole time, but she speaks 4 languages and is a lot smarter than he is. So Steve agrees to watch the counter while she gives translating a try. Back in town, Nancy takes her boyfriend/coworker Will's brother Jonathan to visit the old woman with the diseased rats. Pretending to be official reporters instead of just interns, they follow the woman down to her creepy old basement, where, strangely, it looks like the rodents have been devouring entire bags of fertilizer. Confused, they ask Mrs. Driscoll here if she's sure that it was just rats, when all of a sudden they hear a loud crash from the next room. Smiling, that's when the woman remembers that she actually caught one of them, and whatever's underneath the blanket, it's strong enough to shake the entire cage. Okay, it's a good thing that Nancy and Jonathan decided to pay Old Lady Driscoll here a visit, because they've just discovered an incredibly important clue about the Mind Flayer's physiology that could be the key to defeating it. At the pool, Karen found Billy tweaking out in the chemical storage room, but what she didn't notice is what he was doing in there. Right before she walked in, it looked like he was drinking or getting ready to drink from a bottle full of ammonia, a chemical used for pH balancing. This matches up with what Nancy just found here in the basement, where the rats have been eating bags full of fertilizer that contain ammonium. Both of these are nitrogen-rich compounds, which indicates that the Mind Flayer may be extracting nitrogen to fuel its growth and transformation. Ammonium compounds can also be used in biological breakdown processes, including softening and liquefying tissues and breaking down proteins. Just like before when we saw the rats exploding into red goo, meaning that the reason why the infected are consuming these chemicals is so that the Mind Flayer can break them down and absorb them as it continues to grow. Now, because it needs such massive quantities of these chemicals, they can use this knowledge to help them track it down. They should start by searching any areas where they store large amounts of ammonia, like nearby farms and factories. And this would eventually lead them to the steel mill, where the compounds are used for cooling and treating metal. They can also use its dependence on ammonia as a potential weakness. One method is to cut off its food supply by removing all of the ammonia and ammonium compounds in the town. The only problem is that there's no way to get it done quickly, but there's another way that we can turn its food source into a trap instead. What they need to do is introduce a chemical agent that counters the ammonia's effects. They should start by getting as many bags of fertilizer as they can and then treating them with hydrochloric acid, which they can find at the pool. The acid itself neutralizes the ammonia, turning it to an unusable compound, so if the rats consume enough and are then absorbed into the creature's biomass, this would disrupt its ability to process the biological material, like cutting off its food supply from the inside. The best part is that hydrochloric acid interacts violently with pure ammonia, and when the broken down chemicals meet inside of the Mind Flayer's body, they could produce a buildup of toxic gas that causes it to literally explode. Following up on a mystery of her own, Joyce goes to the library and takes out a bunch of books on electromagnetism, but she still can't make any sense of what she's reading. At a loss, she decides to visit the boys' science teacher, Mr. Clark, accidentally forgetting all about dinner with Hopper. While Jonathan gets some pictures of the rabid rat, Nancy reaches out to every pest control company in the area, asking if they've received any similar calls. Just then, Nancy says that it's time to go, telling Jonathan that she found a lead, but as soon as they're gone, the rat explodes into a sentient pile of goo that escapes from the cage and starts crawling across the floor. As Billy's condition keeps getting worse and worse, he starts having flashbacks to the Upside Down, where alternate Billy commanded him to start building the Mind Flayer army. Realizing that he's literally burning up, he tries taking an ice-cold shower to cool off, but that's when his fellow lifeguard Heather here comes to check on him. He tries to resist for as long as he can, but eventually he just can't control it anymore, and before the girl even realizes that she's in danger, he suddenly jumps to his feet and knocks her out. The boys accidentally wind up bumping into Elle and Max while they're at the mall, and catching him red-handed, she takes her friend's advice and dumps Mike right there on the spot. At Mr. Mr. Clark's, he demonstrates what could be happening to Joyce's magnets using an electromagnetic field. According to him, a powerful enough machine could cause it to happen all over town. And after hearing this, she gets a bad feeling that the scientists from the lab might have come back. After a long day of translating, Dustin and the others finally manage to figure out the entire message, but they still have absolutely no clue what it means. They're about to hit another dead end when Steve, of all people, makes a game-changing discovery. The music in the background of the recording exactly matches up with this coin-operated ride, which means that the message was recorded right here at the mall. After dark, Billy stuffs the girl into the trunk of his car and brings her back to the steel mill. Removing the tape from her mouth, he tells her not to fight back as a terrifying mass of flesh emerges from the shadows and attacks her with its tentacles, making one victim down with a lot more to go. Meanwhile, back at Elle's place, she and Max decide to use her powers to spy on the boys and see what they're up to. The girls expect them to be begging for another chance when really they're just talking crap about how girls are too emotional and laughing at each other's farts as usual. Instead, they decide to spy on old Billy Boy next, but Max warns her that they might not like what they see, and so she has no idea how true that really is. She finds him hunched over someone on the ground when all of a sudden he turns directly towards Elle as if he can see her too, and the vision of him disappears in a cloud of black smoke. Okay, it looks like bad news Billy is getting into even more trouble than usual. And for a guy like him, that's really saying something. Now that his infection has gotten worse, it seems like the Mind Flayer is using him to upgrade from rats to humans, starting with poor Heather here. But before we see what's going on with them, we need to talk about Joyce and the Scoops troop. She's on the verge of another important discovery that could change everything. But the problem is that she's not seeing the big picture. When Joyce hears giant electromagnetic device, her first thought is that the scientists are conducting more experiments back at the old lab again. Now, I can see why she'd think that after being gaslit by them so many times, but this time it just doesn't make sense, and here's why. Remember, the lab was almost completely destroyed during the last attack, meaning that they'd need to rebuild, and a machine of this size would take a massive amount of workers, equipment, and materials to construct. There is absolutely no way that they could have snuck all that gear into Hawkins without anyone noticing, unless they disguised the project as something else. It would also need a direct connection to the city's power grid and a huge amount of space, but set up in a way where no one would think twice about it. Now, with all that being said, all she has to do is put together the pieces. Where is there an extremely large, newly constructed building with access to a ton of power? And the answer leads you right back to the Starcourt Mall, which just so happens to match up with what Steve discovered about the Russian message. Finding the machine's location is only the first step, and this isn't the kind of thing that Joyce can handle on her own, so even though she doesn't trust them, she needs to gather as much proof as she can, and then warn Dr. Owens and the scientist about what's going on. But first, I'd get Will and Jonathan and plan to stay somewhere far away from Hawkins until it was all over. Joyce comes over to Hop's place first thing in the morning, but he isn't too exactly happy to see her after getting stood up the night before. Telling him that it was just an accident, she explains the situation with the magnets, and now she's worried that the scientists could be screwing with their town again. It takes some convincing, but after seeing that she's going with or without him, he eventually agrees to help her investigate the old lab just to be sure. Worried about what Elle saw in her vision, the girls decide to check out Billy's room for any signs of foul play, but there's nothing out of the ordinary besides a bunch of ice bags in the bathtub. Max thinks that it's just from working out, but Elle knows it's a sure sign of Mind Flayer activity, and their fears are confirmed when they find the girls' bloody lifeguard gear hidden under the sink. Back with the boys, Will here wakes up early and puts together a classic D&D campaign, trying to get his friends to have some fun like they used to back in the good old days. He's really putting his heart and soul into it, but it's obvious that Mike and Lucas just don't want to play anymore, and all they want to do is talk about Max and Elle. Heartbroken, he eventually storms out even though Mike tries to make it up to him. But while his friends say that it's just part of growing up, Will still misses the childhood that they suddenly left behind. The girls head to the town pool, where the other lifeguards aren't much help. But noticing Heather's picture on the board, Elle is able to use her powers to find out what Billy has done to her. The vision takes her to a house with a red door where, inside, she finds the girl submerged in a bathtub full of ice water, screaming for help as she's suddenly dragged down into the abyss. While Dustin and Steve are off searching the mall for Russian spies, Robin makes a major breakthrough in the case. Their delivery man works for Lynx Transportation, matching up with the phrase Silver Cat. Running to the food court, she realizes that the other parts of the code are all references to different shops in the mall, and something's going to happen when the two hands of the clock meet 9:45. aka when the blue and yellow meet in the waist. It's raining hard as Hop and Joyce make their way back to the lab, but just like he expected, there are no signs of evil scientists anywhere in sight. To him, making sure the town is safe has become more than just his job, because he knows that Joyce was planning to sell the house and leave town, and he's secretly hoping that he can convince her to stay. It finally looks like it's working until just then they start hearing suspicious noises coming from a nearby office, and Hop tells her to stay put while he goes to check it out. Feeling bad, Mike and Lucas try going over to Will's place to apologize, only to realize that he's not at home. He's been out at Castle Byers looking through their old things, but the memories of their good times together only make him feel worse. And taking a bat, he starts tearing down the whole fort in a moment of rage. After the mall closes, Dustin, Steve, and Robin grab some binoculars and set up shop across from the loading dock, looking for anything suspicious. Sure enough, the guards are all armed with AKs, but the place where they're dropping the deliveries looks like an ordinary storage room. Just then, they accidentally make too much noise and attract the guards' attention, but they're able to escape before he gets there, and now all they have to do is find a way into that closet. Okay, or they could just not. I mean, they get into the closet and then what? They find some kind of nuclear warhead or biological weapon that could kill everyone in a 10-mile radius if they so much as look at it the wrong way? Steve and Dustin are definitely a legendary team, but I wouldn't trust any of them besides maybe Robin here with matters of national security. Plus, it's obvious that they're in way over their heads. Playing Solve the Riddle over the radio was one thing, but now they're dealing with real soldiers who have real AKs, which means that they've reached the point where it's time to turn this case over to the proper authorities. But if they're determined to get in there without any help, they're going to have to get creative. Sooner or later, these guys have to clock out from their shift, so I'd follow him around and see where it goes. If he puts the key card down or into a locker, then that's their chance to steal it while he's not paying attention. Or they can call up Elle and use her mind powers to take it right out of his pocket from long range. But if they notice that the keycard is missing, then the security will only get that much worse, which means that the real best way to sneak in is with no keycard at all. For this, they'll need to go to either Imperial Panda or Kaufman Shoes and get an empty box that's big enough for Dustin to fit inside. Then, either have Steve pose as a delivery driver or get the box containing Dustin onto the truck before the next delivery. This way, they'll carry him straight into the closet without ever knowing that he was even there. Then, he can open the door from the inside, and they can find out what's really going on here. At the lab, Hopper starts clearing the place out one office at a time, but just when it looks like the trespasser is gone, he's suddenly ambushed by this giant Russian commando, Grigori, who starts kicking his ass like nobody's business. Hop does his best to fight back, but he's already too injured from the sneak attack, and by the time that Joyce finally gets there, he's knocked out cold on the floor, with the Russian speeding away on a motorcycle. Following their newest lead, Elle and Max arrive at the girl's house and sneak inside. To their surprise, they find Billy sitting there having a lovely meal with the girl's family, but the weird thing is that he's acting totally normal, like way too normal for Billy. To the parents, it looks like everything's fine, so the girls have to leave before things get any more awkward, but Elle knows that this creep is up to no good, and as she rides away, the Mind Flayer suddenly recognizes her as the girl who closed the gate. The boys eventually find Will at Castle Byers, but just when they get there, he senses that the same terrifying presence is there once again and finally tells them that the Mind Flayer is back. At the same time, Heather's mother Janet randomly collapses to the floor as she and Billy exchange a suspicious glance, and when her father Tom rushes over to help, they suddenly get up and knock him out as well. making 3 victims down and taking them as the next 2 members of the Mind Flayer's army. On a hunch, Nancy and Jonathan decide to follow up with Old Lady Driscoll, only to find the woman down in the basement gorging herself on more fertilizer. As she's taken away in an ambulance, the only thing that she keeps yelling is, "I have to go back," but they don't realize that she's talking about the steel mill. Just then, Heather's parents wake up in the factory's basement, with her and Billy already standing over them. Terrified, they try begging the 2 of them to stop, but the girl explains that they'll understand soon enough, and the moment that they leave, the Mind Flayer emerges from the shadows in physical form, plunging its tentacles into their throats as it adds them to its army of drones. In the morning, Hop wakes up back at the cabin feeling like he just lost a fight with a knockoff Terminator. After trading his rain-soaked uniform for some fresh clothes, they start brainstorming ways to find the attacker until Joyce mentions that he escaped on a motorcycle, and that's when Hopper remembers bumping into the very same dude back at the mayor's office a few days ago. At her place, Max turns off the radio when she gets frustrated that the boys won't stop calling, but Mike calls them over the phone instead and insists that they need to talk right away, saying that it could be a matter of life and death. Okay, now they're finally getting somewhere. Between Elle, Max, and the boys, they have enough combined info to figure out what's really going on here. After infecting Heather, it looks like Billy is still going around town gathering more victims for the Mind Flayer's army and adding them to its hive mind. During the day, they behave almost completely normal, but they're all connected to one collective intelligence that can take control of them at any time. It also means that they all share the same memories, and when one of them feels pain, all of the others do as well. That last part is important because it gives us the opportunity to find out where they're coming from, and even to use one of the flayed as a weapon against the Mind Flayer itself. By now, they know that at least Billy and Heather are under its control, but a good way to find out who else might be is by paying attention to their reactions to heat and sunlight during the day. Since it's the middle of summer, it shouldn't be too difficult to notice who's overdressed for the season, and the infected will instantly give themselves away. If they can find one of the Mind Flayer's victims, this opens up some interesting possibilities. First, they can simply watch them from a distance until they eventually go back to the steel mill and track them straight back to the monster's hideout. Or they can capture one of them and use Elle's mind powers to see into their memories. As long as they can't see where they are, the flayed can't snitch on your location back to the Mind Flayer. So after capturing one, I'd keep them blindfolded and restrained and cause them pain whenever anyone else from the group was under attack, sort of using them like a meat shield to temporarily stun the monster and its army whenever they're in trouble. There's no way to save everyone in town, but what they can do is start trying to direct the Mind Flayer towards strategic targets. Knowing that it's attracted to ammonia, I'd start leaving large quantities of the stuff near the houses of the dumbest people in town, as a way of luring it into adding them to the hive mind. I mean, it's a long shot, but maybe their lack of intelligence will rub off during the assimilation process, gradually deteriorating the Mind Flayer's own intelligence over time. They can actually use fire against it, so once they've figured out that it's hiding in the steel mill, they should just burn the whole place down before it gets any stronger. They meet up back in Mike's basement, where Will explains the sudden feelings of dread that he's been getting ever since that night at the movies. He's worried it's a sign that the Mind Flayer is still around, explaining when Elle closed the gate, the portion of the Mind Flayer that was inside of him never made it back down to the upside down. Instead, it lingered here in town until something made it strong enough to claim a new host again, and that host just so happens to be Max's brother Billy. But first, they need a way to prove that his theory is true. At the mayor's office, Hopper storms inside demanding to know the name of the burly Russian biker who's been paying him visits, but of course, Larry here tries his best to play dumb. It quickly turns into a dirt-slinging match, with each of them threatening to expose the other's bad habits, but when the mayor disrespects his dead daughter straight to his face, that's when Hopper decides that he's done talking. Jumping out of his seat, he starts giving this a-hole the beatdown of a lifetime, while Joyce keeps the secretary busy outside. And after threatening to chop off a couple of his fingers with a cigar cutter, he finds out that the hitman works for the owners of the new Starcourt Mall. So they decide to take a field trip over to the mayor's house and take a look at the purchase records for themselves. Speaking of the mall, Robin comes back with blueprints of the entire city from the county recorder's office, and it looks like they can use their air ducts to sneak into the secret room without needing a keycard. Meanwhile, the pool crew notice Billy behaving mostly normal, if a bit overdressed for the weather, but the boys can tell that something is not right here. They need a way to get to the Mind Flayer to reveal its presence, and that's when Will remembers that the creature hates being too warm. So they come up with a plan to trap Billy in the sauna and crank up that heat until they can draw it out. The Scooper spies decide to recruit Lucas's little sister Erica for the job, being the only person they know who's small enough to fit inside the air ducts. But this kid is smart and she doesn't work for free. They offer the girl as much free ice cream as she wants, if she can get it done. And after thinking it over, she eventually agrees to help them on their quest. Climbing into the vents, the girl follows their directions all the way to the other side of the mall until she eventually pops out inside the secret room. Opening the door, she tells the others to come take a look. They have no idea just how unbelievable their situation is about to get. Once the pool closes for the night, the kids find Billy in the locker room and start taunting him into chasing them around the dark building. Eventually, he spots what he thinks is one of the boys hiding in the sauna, but really it's just a practice dummy that they set up as a decoy. And the moment that he steps inside, Elle uses her mind powers to take him down, while the boys quietly lock him in. At the mall, Steve and the others finally open one of the boxes and are shocked to find a bunch of futuristic-looking canisters containing mysterious green ooze hidden inside. All of a sudden, the entire room starts dropping down at breakneck speed, and it turns out that this is no closet, it's an elevator. Okay, well, that's not good. The truth is that this plan was doomed from the start, and honestly, I'm surprised that you even made it this far. So, I'm sorry, Scoops Troop, but it looks like you four just f***ed up. The first sign that things were going to end badly was when Dustin here intercepted a top-secret Russian code, and then decided to ask Steve Harrington, of all people, for help. But I don't know who's worse, Dustin for asking Steve, or Steve for agreeing to help him. As the older and wiser one here, you probably should have realized that this was a dumbass idea right from the start. But instead, you agreed to help a literal 13-year-old kid attempt to break into a top-secret enemy military facility, as if that's something you can just do in between shifts at the ice cream shop. But if there's someone who has absolutely no excuse, I'm sorry to say that it's you, Robin. At least Dustin's just a kid and Steve's mind has been warped from all the Farrah Fawcett hairspray. But you were supposed to be the smart one here. If that's true, then explain how you walked in on Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy attempting to translate a secret military code, and instead of immediately warning the proper authorities, just decided to pull up a chair and join the circus? You'd think that after seeing the heavily armed guards, the reality of the situation would start to set in, but instead, you said, let's bring another child into the mix and make her climb through the air vents like Bruce Willis in Die Hard. The only one who I don't blame is Erica, because she's an entrepreneur, and free ice cream for life sounds like a pretty damn good deal just to help a couple of idiots break into a closet. But the one thing that she didn't count on was that you three morons would turn out to be right, and now it looks like you're gonna get the chance to meet these Russians face to face. And I hope they like ice cream, because Scoops Troop, you done all f***ed up. The kids keep cranking up the heat on Billy until he goes from a violent maniac to actually begging them to stop. But Will's subconscious connection to the monster reveals that it's all just a trick. They manage to warn Max just as he grabs a piece of a broken tile and smashes through the glass. But Lucas uses his wrist rocket to knock him back down. An instant later, the lights begin to flicker as black veins start appearing all over his body, and he breaks the steel chain that's holding the door shut. Standing her ground, Elle uses a heavy barbell to pin him against the wall, but he throws it off with a surge of supernatural strength and grabs her by the neck right in front of her friends. Mike grabs a pipe and hits him in the back, giving Elle a chance to send him flying straight through the brick wall, but he quickly gets up and disappears into the night. Returning back to the steel mill basement, where the Mind Flayer's army is steadily growing one person at a time. Back at the mall, the elevator finally comes to a stop hundreds of feet below the surface, but they can't get get the door open without a keycard. That's when Dustin spots an access hatch in the ceiling, but it looks like climbing out won't be an option either, which means that they're stuck here until further notice. The trail of purchase records leads Hopper and Joyce to a suspicious farmhouse on the edge of town, where it looks like somebody has been living while trying hard not to be noticed. Searching the house, it seems like the place is empty until they notice a strange humming sound coming from under the bed. And when they lift up the mattress to investigate, they find a hidden staircase leading down into a secret basement. Hop leads the way inside, only to find a scientist and a mechanic speaking Russian to each other as they work on some kind of machine. Just then, they hear some heavy footsteps upstairs as the knockoff Terminator comes back for round 2, but this time it's Hop who gets the jump on him. Calling his bluff, the man suddenly spins around and throws Hopper against the wall, and the two of them start wrestling for his weapon as shots fly all over the place. He eventually manages to hit the guy's knee with a nearby wrench, giving them a chance to run for their lives, and they escape back to his truck, with the Russian scientist just in time as he limps after them, spraying bullets into the engine. The truck breaks down not too much farther up the road, where Hopper and Joyce use their mechanic skills to turn it into a smoking ball of flames. Forced to hike the rest of the way, they set off through the woods with their new friend Alexei, while Elle uses her powers to find out where their parents are. They're trying to come up with a plan, but Mike points out that stopping Billy won't be enough, and they'll actually have to defeat the Mind Flayer himself if they're ever going to be safe. Okay, Mike here is starting to finally get the big picture. Now they know that the Mind Flayer is possessing people in almost the same way that it did to Will, and all of these victims are connected to it via one giant hive mind. Knowing this, it gives them an opportunity to bring back an idea that they never got the chance to use back in Season 2. If you remember way back 6 months ago, Elle here was on a field trip of death with her psionic sister Callie and her gang of punks, as they traveled around the states hunting down anyone who was connected to Dr. Brenner. Now, Callie has supernatural powers just like Elle, but instead of being able to move things with her mind, she can actually influence the minds of others. It's like mind reading, except she can make them see things that aren't there, and even experience their greatest fears as if it was really happening. The last time that we saw her, Callie was somewhere in Chicago, where she and Elle had to split up after they were almost caught by the police. Elle here already knows what she looks like, and she can easily use her powers to find out where Callie is. Then they can use Callie's powers against the Mind Flayer. All they'd have to do is capture one of the random NPCs who were turned into the Flayed, and then use Callie's powers to confuse, disorient, or even terrify them. Because all of their minds are connected, that feeling of terror should spread to everyone in the family, even the Mind Flayer itself. This could be an incredibly useful weapon when we're dealing with a creature whose greatest threats are its telepathic abilities, allowing us to completely cancel them out, and even turn the Mind Flayer's own abilities against it. They really don't have a lot of time here, but Hopper and Joyce are already on their way to Illinois, and if they can find Callie and get her back to Hawkins, or even bring one of the Flayed to her, then that would be a total game changer. As for the mall kids, they've been trapped for 8 hours with no sign of rescue, and Erica is ready to resort to drinking the green goo just to survive. That's when they hear a small engine approaching the door and realize that some guards are headed their way. Hiding on top of the elevator, they wait for the guards to leave before quickly jumping down, using the super strong container of goo to hold the door just long enough for them to slide underneath. The substance ends up melting a hole straight through the floor when the canister finally breaks, and as they look around, they realize that they're in an underground facility with tunnels that go farther than the eyes can see. In the woods, Alexei suddenly takes off running the moment that Hop lets his guard down, but it turns out that he's just excited to see good old American gas stations. After stopping inside for some snacks, Hopper commandeers a sick new convertible from the Todd father here, and they speed away to visit an old friend who might be able to help them translate. Down in the tunnels, Dustin's walkie starts going off as it picks up the same Russian broadcast that got them into this mess, meaning that they must be close to its its origin. They also know that the signal can reach the outside world, so they come up with a plan to find the communications room and use it to call for help. Teaming up with Nancy and Jonathan, the kids travel back to Heather's house looking for some more clues. The family isn't home, but someone was having an absolute field day with their household chemicals. They eventually figure out that Billy must have flayed Heather's parents too, and if there's a particular place in town where the creature is hiding, then maybe they can use Mrs. Driscoll to lead them straight to it. Their friends keep sneaking even deeper into the facility, but they're almost spotted when they come around a corner and find themselves face to face with dozens of heavily armed soldiers. Somehow, Erica manages to spot the comms station at the other end of the hall, and waiting for just the right moment, they quietly slip inside while the door is still open. But when they turn around, they see one of the guards staring straight at them. He reaches for his weapon, but Robin confuses him by reciting part of the code, and while he's distracted, Steve jumps in and actually kicks this guy's ass. He's just as shocked as everyone else, but somehow that's not even the most surprising thing that they'll see today, because while Dustin is grabbing his keycard so they can escape, Robin takes a look in the next room and notices something that they never could have imagined. The Russians have built another giant machine, and they're using it to open a new gateway to the Upside Down. At the hospital, Nancy and Jonathan make it to the old woman's room only to find that she's gone missing. Just then, Tom steps into the doorway with blood all over his hands, forcing Jonathan to club him with a vase as they rush past. In the hall, they're confronted by their asshole co-worker Bruce, and now that he's joined the Mind Flayer's army, that makes at least 4 victims down. Running for their lives, they lock themselves in a room while Nancy tries calling for help, but the dude just slams his arm straight through the glass and unlocks the door for himself. He starts beating Jonathan up with a metal stool, WWE style, but Nancy grabs some scissors and stabs him in the shoulder, running as he starts coming after her next. Grabbing a fire extinguisher, she hides until just the right moment before jumping out to smash him in the face, and this stuns Tom long enough for Jonathan to stab him in the throat. All of a sudden, their bodies melt into piles of red goo that merged together in the hallway, forming into a terrifying fleshy monstrosity that begins chasing them through the halls. Okay, just when I thought Bruce's creepy smile was gonna be the scariest thing that we'd seen all day, it looks like the Mind Flayer just made itself a mini-me out of their liquefied bodies. Now, when it comes to fighting this thing, Elle's mind powers would obviously be their most useful weapon, but using her powers would also mean putting her and the other kids in danger. So as long as they're downstairs and this thing is up here, then I'd say it's better for the older siblings to keep it that way. Fighting this thing head-on is obviously not an option, so the plan starts by running for their lives. The key here would have been to start running before it formed into a goo monster, since they had a solid 2 minutes between Tom and Bruce going down, and the creature reaching its second form. I mean, that's plenty of time to run for your life, and personally, I would have been halfway to the parking lot by now. Speaking of the car, the group took Nancy's ride to get over there, which means that she still has the keys. Knowing this, Jonathan should use himself as a distraction, getting the monster to chase him as far as the other side of the building as possible, while Nancy runs back to the lobby, gathers up the kids, and gets to the car. When you think about it, hospital hallways are always full of large fire doors that block off one section from another. As we're about to see, a door won't stop the creature forever, but it will slow it down for a significant amount of time while it has to revert into ooze, and then rebuild itself after sliding underneath. If Jonathan uses these doors effectively, then he can slow the creature down long enough for Nancy to get to the car, then circle back around and meet up with them in the parking lot before it can chase him down. Now, with that being said, fire is their best option if they have to fight, and they already have all of the materials that they need to start one. First, I'd search the rooms for any flammable liquid like rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer and drench a bunch of sheets or bandages in it, and then wrap them around a stick like crutches, the railing from a hospital bed, or an IV pole. Then all they'd need is a spark to create a torch. Neither of them have a lighter, but they can make their own spark, either by finding a defibrillator, exposing the wires from some electrical equipment, or by short-circuiting an outlet with a small piece of metal. Once they've got one started, they can use the fire to hold back the monster, and if they loosen up an oxygen tank before tapping it in a room and then throwing the torch inside, they can create an explosion that's powerful enough to blast this melty monstrosity into smithereens. Meanwhile, underground, the city guards finally catch on and start chasing the Scoops troop back through the facility. Harrington almost gets them out of there, but they eventually wind up trapped with nowhere to go besides back into the vents. So he and Robin hold the door while the two kids escape, hoping to come back later with some help. On the surface, Will senses the Mind Flayer's presence and leads them upstairs to where Nancy is hiding. The creature makes it to her first and gets inside by oozing under the locked door before reconstructing itself back together. But just when it looks like she's done for, Elle breaks open the door and starts slamming the monstrosity back and forth into the walls before sending it flying straight through the window. Chasing it outside to confirm the kill, they see it slither through a grate into the sewers, making its way to the steel mill and joining up with the constantly growing Mind Flayer body, where Billy ominously announces that it's time. After capturing Steve and Robin, the guards start roughing him up for a bit to find out who he works for. Realizing that traditional tactics won't work on Special Agent Harrington, they bring him and the girl to a scary-looking room and strap them to a couple chairs, saying how they'll be back soon with something special to make them talk. While Elle wanders around in the Upside Down trying to find out where the Mind Flayer has been taking its victims, the others break out into a big argument over the safest way to use her powers. Most of them aren't even thinking twice about it, but Mike eventually admits that he loves her and is terrified of losing her again, saying how they need to treat her like a person and not just a weapon for them to use. That's when Elle comes back to the group, and she's finally figured out where to find Billy. Now, somewhere in Illinois, Hopper brings the Russian scientist to visit his paranoid journalist friend, Murray, where they begin to piece together what he's been doing to their town. With Murray's help as a translator, they find out that the Russians are building a machine to try and open another gate. So far, none of their attempts have worked, and that's why they came here to Hawkins, where a gate had already been opened, hoping to repeat the process and open it again. Waking up back in the interrogation room, the Scoopers try hopping over to grab some scissors from a nearby table, but end up falling just when they get close. As they're lying on the floor, Robin confesses that she actually was obsessed with Steve for an entire school year, but the whole time it was like he never knew that she actually existed. Steve here apologizes and admits that being popular isn't that great anyway, but their heart-to-heart is rudely interrupted when the Russians come back with a needle full of mysterious blue juice, injecting them both with a dose of truth serum. In her visions, Elle sees Billy just sitting in his room, but the group's divided on how to react. On the one hand, it's obviously a trap, but Lucas thinks that they can still put up a fight as long as they know what's coming. They eventually decide that they need to find the source of the Mind Flayer's power, and Billy knows exactly where it is. So instead of going to him, Elle is going to use her powers to see into his memories and find out where the monster is hiding. Stepping back into the void, she cautiously approaches Billy and holds his hand, trying to see what happened. Just then, he looks directly at the girl and grabs onto her arm, holding on before suddenly letting go and dropping her into the abyss. The next thing that she knows, she finds herself on a beach somewhere in California where a young Billy is making happy memories with his mom. Off in the distance, she can see a storm of black clouds in the sky and realizes that it must be the source that they're looking for. Now that they know the truth, Hopper calls up the feds to warn Dr. Owens about the secret Russian experiments. He says that it might take a while, but Joyce isn't satisfied with that time frame and starts literally demanding to speak with the manager, telling them to hurry up and get to Hawkins before it's too late. Okay, at least someone finally called for backup, but you know what really bothers me about this? If they'd just used the damn phone back at the 7-Eleven a few hours ago. I mean, the backup would be here already. Seriously, Hopper, you already found a secret military facility hidden underneath an abandoned house, and a Russian super soldier has been hunting you down ever since. So do we really need to get a translator involved here? It seems like what you saw with your own two eyes would be enough to call in the reinforcements for me. I'm just saying. And now that the cavalry is finally on the way, they need to find the kids before things get any worse. But there's a problem. They think that the kids are at the fair, when really they're back at Hopper's cabin. The good news is that there's an easy solution, because the boys are almost always carrying their walkie-talkies. And 11 also has one in the cabin. There's a chance that Will left his back at home, so once they realize that they can't find the kids, all they'd have to do is find his walkie-talkie and give him a call. Something else that they're not considering here is that they're still being tracked by the knockoff Terminator, and they could end up leading him right to the kids. But there's a way around this. The Russians are looking for Hopper and his very noticeable new convertible, but they have absolutely no idea who Murray is and would never even think to look for him. Knowing this, Joyce, Murray, and Alexei should take Murray's van, while Hopper puts together a quick decoy to make it look like Alexei is still in the passenger seat, and leads the Russians on a wild goose chase all around town. This would give the others a chance to find the kids without putting themselves in danger, and since Alexei isn't with him, Hopper can use the scientist's location as a bargaining chip if he gets caught. The Scoopers here are having a lot more fun than they expected as the truth serum starts to kick in. But that's only until the interrogators come back and get ready to start removing fingernails. Panicking, Robin tells them how they intercepted the secret code, but Steve says that's only a matter of time before Dustin and his friends come back to shut down their whole operation. Just then, an alarm goes off somewhere in the base, and the colonel leaves to investigate, finding another hole burned straight through the floor. It, of course, is a distraction, and as soon as he's gone, Dustin and Erica suddenly jump out of the doorway, zapping the doctor with a cattle prod and setting their buddies free. As Elle explores deeper into Billy's memories, things begin to take a much darker turn as the boy gets older. Finally, she finds herself outside of the steel mill, where she can hear Billy being dragged into the monster's nest. Now that they know where to find it, she pulls off her blindfold to come back to the real world, but this time everyone else is gone. All of a sudden, Billy steps out from the shadows, telling the girl that she made a mistake because now the Mind Flayer knows exactly where to find her. Pushing him away with a blast of energy, Elle launches herself back to reality, but at the same time, Mrs. Driscoll and all of the other mind-controlled victims descend into the steel mill basement, melting into goo and merging with the Mind Flayer until it grows so large that it explodes through the roof. That makes dozens down, with an entire town more to go. And now it's finally ready to destroy Hawkins once and for all. Shaken up, Eleven tells the others what she saw in her vision, saying how the Mind Flayer wants her dead, and that it's going to kill all of her friends next. That's when Will's spidey senses start tingling, and rushing outside, they're terrified to see the enormous monster already headed their way. Working as fast as they can, the squad gathers up some weapons and barricades the windows before gathering back to back at the center of the room. For a moment, everything goes quiet until all of a sudden, one of the tentacles bursts through the wall and starts going after everyone in sight. Even their strongest weapons don't have much of an effect, but Elle uses her mind powers to tear its creepy little mouth right off. As soon as one's gone, two more appear and surround her, and she uses the same trick to take them both down. But just when it looks like they're winning the fight, the creature blasts straight through the ceiling and starts dragging her away by the ankle. The others struggle to hold on while Nancy starts unloading with the 12 gauge, but it's Lucas who ultimately comes in clutch with the axe and saves her life. Getting back on her feet, Elle channels all of her anger into a massive psionic blast that rips the monster's head completely in half. And even though that's still not enough to stop it, it at least gives them a chance to escape while the Mind Flayer is healing up. Okay, talk about a close call. This thing hasn't even been in its final form for 10 minutes, and it already almost turned Elle into another pile of red goo. They're all lucky to be alive, and it looks like now they at least have a little while to regroup while the monster is still repairing itself. But if they want to take it down for good, then they have to remember what actually hurts it. In most situations, a 12 gauge is just about the best weapon that you could possibly ask for. And we all know Nancy's never been afraid of bringing in a little firepower, but this time it was totally useless. That's because the Mind Flayer's biomass is too fluid, allowing it to regenerate from the small holes created by the buckshot. Tearing off a limb works for a little while, but the amputated tentacles just try to go back and rejoin the greater body, so what they really need to do is use fire-based attacks to prevent it from regenerating and deal lasting damage. Being in Hopper's cabin, we can assume that there are more bottles of alcohol around than a liquor store, or they can also use any spare fuel from the shed for the same purpose. Then all they'd need are some rags and a flame from the stove, and they could make Molotov cocktails to deal devastating damage to the creature at a long range. They could also wrap baseball bats or broken pieces of furniture with cloth and set them on fire, creating makeshift torches that would be life-saving if the monster gets too close. Now, the reason why the Mind Flayer was able to find them so quickly is because Elle gave their location away when she telepathically communicated with Billy, but this could also turn into an advantage if they use it creatively. Nancy's car allows them to move around a lot faster than the Mind Flayer, so while it's still regenerating, they can drive somewhere far across town and then use L to deliberately give their position away once again. The Mind Flayer will come to find them once it's done healing up, but by the time that it gets there, they'll already be long gone, and they can use this strategy to keep it distracted while their friends close the gate, or even lead the Mind Flayer straight into a trap, like luring it into a gas station and then blowing the whole place sky high. Speeding back to town, they stop at a grocery store to patch up Eleven's leg, and while they're looking for supplies, Lucas finds a giant stash of fireworks that he says are like dynamite if you strap a couple together. Meanwhile, Mike here is just about to admit his true feelings when they get an emergency distress call from Dustin saying how they're trapped somewhere and need help, but the batteries on his walkie-talkie die before he can explain everything. The Scoops troupe have been hiding out in the movie theater after escaping the lab, but when he gets back to his seat, it looks like Steve and Robin just randomly disappeared. Those two are still coming down from the effects of the truth serum and have run to the bathroom as they both suddenly get violently ill. Meanwhile, across town, Hop and crew pull up at the fair hoping to find the kids, not realizing that they're already on a completely different mission of their own. As they're searching the crowd, the mayor notices them passing by, and he immediately runs to his car to call up his Russian buddies. Elle uses her abilities to figure out where Dustin and the others were calling from, and they start heading over to the mall while the Scoopers are still puking their guts up in the bathroom. Things start getting a little bit romantic when Steve here admits that he's catching feelings, but when Robin said that she was obsessed with him, it was actually because she had a crush on this girl Tammy Thompson, but could never get her attention because she liked Steve. She's been afraid to admit it because of how people normally react when they find out that she's into girls, but even though poor Steve here just struck out once again, he quickly takes it all in stride and starts goofing around with her like nothing changed. At the fair, Murray sets Alexei loose to have some fun, but then all of a sudden, the knockoff Terminator emerges from the crowd and shoots him square in the chest before he even knows what happened. Horrified, Murray rushes over to help him, hiding the man next to a tent and telling him to keep pressure on the wound until he gets back. Running through the fair, he spots Hopper and Joyce just in time to warn them that the Russians are coming. And realizing that they're surrounded, Hop tells Agent Byers to make a run for the car while he distracts them by ducking into the funhouse. One of these NPCs makes the mistake of following him inside, but Hop immediately knocks his gun away and starts opening up a can of whoop-ass. By the time that Joyce makes it to Alexei, it's already too late, and that makes one Russian scientist down with an entire base still to go. Using one of the hanging punching bags, Hop knocks out the first attacker, grabbing his radio and weapon before disappearing deeper into the funhouse. The knockoff Terminator is the next one to show up, following Hop into the Hall of Mirrors, but Jim uses his reflection as a distraction, allowing him to get the jump on the guy and empty the clip straight into his chest. Unfortunately, Grigori here was wearing a bulletproof vest, so he quickly shakes it off and gets back to the fight, but not before Hopper escapes down the slide and jumps back into the car as they speed away, learning from a Russian transmission that the kids are at the mall. Waiting for the movie to end, the Scoops troupe tries sneaking out with the rest of the crowd, but they're quickly spotted by more Russian guards and are forced to hide behind this cookie stand. Just when it looks like they're about to get caught, a whole-ass car comes flying through the air, knocking them all over like a bunch of bowling pins as Elle and the others arrive to save the day. Reunited at last, everyone spends a minute catching up on the details of their different quests, but the family reunion is suddenly cut short when Elle collapses in pain, and looking at her leg, they notice something slithering around under her skin in the exact same spot where she was grabbed by the Mind Flayer. Thinking quickly, Jonathan rushes over to one of the restaurants and starts heating up a knife on the stove, using it to carefully make an incision in the girl's leg. He reaches inside, trying his best to get a hold of the slug, but when she can't take the pain anymore, Elle calls him off and decides to do it herself. Using her abilities, she grabs onto the creature and pulls as hard as she can, struggling until she's finally able to drag it out, and chucking it across the food court where Hop curb stomps it into oblivion. Now that they're all together again, they're able to use their collective knowledge to piece together what's happening here. The real Mind Flayer is still in the upside down, but when the Russians started opening a new gate, this allowed it to communicate with the part of itself that was still in our world. That proxy is what they're up against now, but as long as it's still connected to the body, it should die off if they can close the gate again, just like what happened to the demo dogs the last time around.
Okay,
It's officially time for the final showdown, and they're about to come up with a plan to end this nightmare once and for all. But there's at least one potentially game-changing strategy that they haven't picked up on yet this whole time. It all comes back to one incredibly important weakness that they first learned of back in Season 2. Because of the Mind Flayer's extensions of itself in our world are all connected via a centralized hive mind, what happens to one part of it instantly affects every other part of the creature. Back in Dr. Owens' lab, we saw Will experiencing extreme pain when they held a blowtorch to a severed tentacle. And again at the hospital, every attack dealt to Tom or Bruce ended up hurting the other one just as much. Knowing this, I'd say that Hop here just made a critical mistake. Now I get that anyone's natural reaction to seeing that upside down slug come out of L's leg would be to stomp it out of existence, but by doing so, he actually wasted an extremely useful resource. They know that the only way to truly defeat the Mind Flayer's proxy is by closing the gate and cutting it off from the Mind Flayer itself, but they won't be able to do that if they all wind up dead, and thanks to Billy, the giant creature is already headed their way. Instead of destroying the slug, what they could have done is capture it inside of a small container and kept it alive to use it as a weapon. Then one part of the team could have taken the slug and hopped in a car, speeding around town with it and deliberately injuring it as a way to stun the proxy whenever their friends were in trouble. This would have had the added benefit of splitting up the creature's attention, because it would have to retreat from the mall and go after the group with a slug instead before it could get anything else done. There's nothing better than when the thing you're trying to fight actually gives you an incredibly powerful weapon to use against it. And if they'd actually thought this through before killing the slug, then it would have given them a big advantage in the next battle. While Murray, Hop, and Joyce infiltrate the base to shut down the machine, Dustin and Erica are going to help them navigate using their knowledge of the facility, but they need a strong enough signal to reach all the way underground, meaning that they'll have to use Cerebro. So taking Hop's sweet convertible, they head out with Steve and Robin back to the hill across town. As for everyone else, their job is to get to Murray's safe and wait there until the cavalry arrives. But there is one problem. Nancy's car won't start. And that's because the worst brother ever has already sabotaged their ride, leaving them with no choice but to run back to the mall. The adults run into some guards the moment that the elevator door opens up, and when Murray's attempts to confuse them don't work, Hop just steps in and blasts them all with his AK. This gives him and Joyce a chance to steal their uniforms and blend in, while Murray wiggles his way through the vents to disable the security systems. The others realize that they can use the ignition cable from the destroyed car inside the mall, and Elle tries using her abilities to flip it back over, but it looks like her powers are starting to run dry. They're able to get it done using the power of teamwork, but unfortunately they weren't fast enough, because just then they look up to see the Mind Flayer growling down at them through the glass ceiling, running for cover just as it crashes into the mall. Realizing that their friends are in trouble, Steve and Robin quickly jump back into the car, hoping that they can make it in time to help. While the monster's distracted, Mike, Max, and Elle make a break for a nearby store, but end up making too much noise and drawing its attention straight towards them. Seeing this, Lucas grabs his slingshot and uses it to pop a balloon on the other side of the food court. And as the Mind Flayer turns to go after it, the four of them are able to run back out to the parking lot. At the same time, Murray finally reaches the base's power station, setting off the alarms and allowing his partners to enter the vault. Now all they need is the code to open the safe and grab the keys, but that's when they run into another problem. The password is not working. The code is a famous number called Planck's constant, and it looks like Murray got it wrong, but there's one other person who might know it: Dustin's super genius girlfriend, Susie. Nancy's group are still trying to get the car started when Billy starts speeding straight towards them, but she stands her ground, firing shot after shot through his windshield. Just when he's about to crash right into them, Steve suddenly comes to the rescue and T-bones him out of the way, and they all jump into Nancy's car as the Mind Flayer starts chasing after them. Okay, this is not good. Our heroes have come way too far to fail now, but the only way forward is to remember Planck's constant, a number that almost nobody would know off the top of their head. This means that right now the success of their plan, and therefore the safety of the entire world, is riding on if Susie actually picks up the radio, and honestly, nobody besides Dustin believes that she even exists. They need a backup plan for what to do if Susie doesn't work out. But what they don't realize is that they already have everything they need to figure it out. Right now, the Mind Flayer is only going after Elle, and since it thinks that she's in Nancy's car, it just chased them away from the mall. This gives Mike, Max, and Elle a chance to start helping out again, so here's exactly what I would do. Being at the mall, they should only be a short run away from finding a bookstore, and once they're inside, they can search through any physics or mathematics textbooks or even reference books like an encyclopedia and use the index to quickly find Planck's constant. One of their radios was damaged during the Mind Flayer's attacks, but it's still functional, so after finding the number, they can use the radio to tell Dustin, and then Dustin can use Cerebro to tell Hop all the way down in the secret base. Since the Mind Flayer is busy chasing Nancy and the others, this allows them to start moving around the mall without any danger, so if it were me, I'd start heading for the bookstore right now. And hopefully they can find the number in time if Susie doesn't pick up. But then we'd never get to witness the most beautiful moment that's about to happen next. Calling all the way over to Salt Lake City, Dustin finally gets Susie to pick up, but before she can tell him Planck's constant, she wants him to sing Neverending Story in its entirety. With no other choice, he's forced to sing along while all his friends listen over the radio, but it's worth it because the code works, and now Hop and Joyce can use the keys to shut down the machine. At the mall, Billy spots Eleven and the others as he's climbing out of the car, causing the Mind Flayer to turn around and start coming back now that it knows where she is. They try running back through the service tunnels, but he quickly catches up and drags Elle out to the food court. Just when Eleven is about to be mind flayed, Lucas and the others come back and start launching fireworks down from the second floor. The distraction works, and by reminding Billy of the memories of his mother, she's finally able to snap him out of it. Remembering who he is, he stands up to face the creature as it tears him apart with its tentacles, sacrificing himself so that the others can escape, and making one evil stepbrother down with no more to go. Down below, Hopper and Joyce are about to shut down the machine when the knockoff Terminator shows up to crash the party, and they break out into a massive brawl that leads them all the way down into the test chamber itself. Hop finally manages to get the upper hand, throwing him into the machine and making one Grigori down, but now it's so damaged that he can't get back. Heartbroken, Joyce realizes that her only option is to turn the keys, and everyone in the room instantly disintegrates as the machine explodes, sealing the gate and defeating the Mind Flayer once again. 3 months later, the Byers family decide to move out of town, taking Elle with them now that Hopper is gone. Mike finally gets his chance to tell Eleven that he loves her, and they all agree to stay friends no matter what. And it's honestly a downer of an ending, but it's not over yet because across the globe, the Russians have a live Demogorgon hidden in yet another underground facility. And we'll have to check out Season 4 to see what happens next. Stranger Things Season 3, absolutely iconic season of television. I mean, when we were at DragonCon, I must have seen so many people dressed up as Steve in that freaking outfit. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the Guy. We'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.